Something tangible that the leader of the opposition could do in the next election. He could run more women, and he could get more women in those seats if he really wants to prove his credibility in terms of standing up for women.
On the Conservative side of the House, women stand here because we're skilled and we're allowed to use our voice.
While rumors are swirling about Freeland being fired and replaced by Mark Carney, the Liberals are trying to accuse the Conservatives of being misogynist because they don't have a DEI quota. Michelle Ferrari stood up to answer that charge, and she was not going to let them get away with it.
Let's take a look.
Oral questions. The honourable member for Regina Competence.
Has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and the fiscal feud over the $40 billion guardrail is worse than we ever thought. New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, carbon tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus, watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff. Does the finance minister still have her hands on the wheel, and will the deficit be below that $40 billion guardrail?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the first question from the Conservatives relates to the economy and the finance minister. Let's talk about the work she's been doing on behalf of Canadians. Yesterday, we had a 50 basis point interest rate cut announced by the Bank of Canada. That was the fifth time in a row, leading the entire G7, we've seen the interest rates come down from the Bank of Canada. On Saturday, we have a further great news for details for Canadians, which is a GST tax cut on basic essentials for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast. That's groceries, that's things that you buy for your kids for Christmas. That's great news for Canadians under the leadership of this finance minister.
Oh man, there's so many things wrong with what he just said. Where do we begin?
Well, let's start at the last one. The leadership of the finance minister. Wait a minute. So the same finance minister that the Globe and Mail reported was actually against the GST tax holiday and who was against the $250 check deployment for 18 million Canadians. Is that the leadership of the finance minister you're referring to, Arif? Like, come on, man.
Well, and then how they dare to say that, oh, we're cutting GST/HST on essentials, including gifts for your kids. There's, 9 shopping days between when this goes into effect and Christmas itself. Also, I mean, kids' toys, as much as we love to give our children presents for Christmas, they're not essential in the true sense of the word. What is essential are things like diapers that they would have to use regularly, women's feminine products, food, shelter, all
home
these
heating.
Things, home heating. Thank you. These things that are essential and are required to be used year round, really. Why are you guys not taking the GST/HST off it permanently? Why is it only for 2 months? And those are only for the things that apply to this new bill. I mean, home heating's not on there anywhere, and we need that all winter.
Well, because that would be too close to the carbon tax, right? And, we can't be doing that because they make over, $4 billion by 2030 on all of the GST and HST that they collect on the carbon tax itself.
I was just going to say, I'm paying HST, 13% HST on a carbon tax. How is that fair? A tax on a tax.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. And the fact that he's like, oh, this is great news, everybody. The economy is plummeting so badly that the Bank of Canada is racing to the bottom now with the interest rates. Like, now, this is the thing. Some people will say, well, you guys were criticizing the Liberals about the interest rates being so high, and now you're criticizing them about the rates coming down.
Yes.
Yes. The problem isn't them coming down. The problem is the speed at which they are coming down. So a healthy economy returning to equilibrium would have been interest rates gradually being cut over a longer period of time. So a quarter point here, a quarter point there. The fact that they're cutting them by like half points
That's significant.
Like everyone was freaking out when the interest rates were going up by half points, and rightly so, because that was an indication of hyperinflation and the economy essentially going down the crapper.
Yeah, you need to put the brakes on borrowing, because when you borrow, that adds to inflation.
Right. So the fact that things are coming down this fast, that's a huge problem. And what that is going to do is going to induce panic buying of housing, because people are going to say, well, the rates are now down this low. I need to buy a house while I can. And what is that going to do? That is now going to drive up housing prices. That is going to encourage borrowing. And that's going to prompt, you guessed it, inflation. Because remember, when you get a mortgage, that money is not pre-existing in the economy. The banks print it to give you the mortgage, which adds to the money supply, which increases inflation.
And we go into the deep dive on this on today's episode of Northern Dispatch. So go check that out on True North's channel later today when it drops.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Even the bank admitted that they had to cut rates because the economy is performing so poorly under this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And, you know, Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney. A classic example of an incompetent boss blaming subordinates. Does the finance minister not realize that she's about to join a long list of cabinet ministers that have had their careers and their reputations ruined by this prime minister?
So interesting how Freeland is not available for question period again after now two articles, right? Two articles out of the Globe and Mail, one on December 10th, and I believe the other one was today or yesterday, talking about the fact that there are tensions between the Prime Minister's office and Freeland and her office yet again. And the most recent article, Mr. Scheer alluded to it, was that Trudeau is a lot closer to quote-unquote recruiting Mark Carney into the federal government, whatever that means.
Well, how is that possible? Because we're almost at that point where even if somebody did vacate their seat so that Mark Carney could run in that spot, we may not get a by-election, because 9 months before a general election is scheduled, they do not run by-elections.
Right. So that would be January 20th. That would be essentially 9 months. So...
And the House doesn't sit again until I think January 27th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. It's almost at the end of the month in January when the House actually comes back.
Right. We've got less than a week because it rises on the 17th of December, and then it doesn't come back till I think January 27th.
So it's going to be interesting to see like what happens here, and for what? Like, you think just putting Carney in as a minister, even though he can't even sit in the House of Commons? You know, if that is the case, he can't even enter the House of Commons because he's not an MP. Like, what do you think that's going to do? It's not going to bring the Liberal government back from the abyss, but, you know, Trudeau has demonstrated repeatedly his incompetence. Maybe he actually believes this. Tom Mulcair still thinks that he's going to step down, but who knows? I
will say what I think happened here is that Trudeau chose Chrystia Freeland as finance minister, not because she had experience, not because she was good in the role or she was prepared to do the role, because quite frankly, she wasn't. She did not have the background for it. I believe that she was chosen because she would do exactly what Trudeau wanted her to do. And now that she's kind of outlived her usefulness, he's just dumping on her and getting rid of her.
Well, and it also seems like she's not too happy about the fact that, you know, she made a promise publicly about the budget and she wanted to try and stick to it. Trudeau's not letting her. And what happens when women stand up to Justin Trudeau?
He gets rid of them.
Right. Now, this isn't painting Chrystia Freeland as any sort of victim at all. $40 billion is a ridiculous, quote-unquote, guardrail. That's asinine.
Yeah, like, we're not absolving her of any responsibility, but there's a deeper dynamic here between Freeland and Trudeau, and I think she has outlived her usefulness to him. now that things are bad and things are looking bad and the public realizes that things are bad, he's ready to throw her under the bus too.
Yep. So, honk honk, here it comes.
Of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that he's talking about the Bank of Canada, because what has the actual Bank of Canada governor said recently? He said, quote, CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. On inflation, what has Tiff Macklamachi said? Quote, we are no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against us getting inflation down. We have brought it down. That's the handiwork of this finance minister and this government, generating economic growth and being prudent with fiscal management. That's about inflation being on target 11 straight months, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
If he just read a little further, he'd read that it's not because of anything the government's been doing except causing our economy to slow down and underperform. That's why they've taken this step. But you know, a guardrail is something you're supposed to stay far away from. If you even brush up against it, it's a sign you're way off track. If you smash through it, you go flying off a cliff. Now, even Liberal MPs are terrified and are ringing the bell, trying to get off before they smash through the guardrail. One of them said, quote, I think that if we state that we have a $40 billion guardrail, we better stay within those numbers. And another is begging for a fiscally responsible framework. Will the Prime Minister allow a free vote, or will he force his Liberal MPs to stay on that bus as it goes?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, allow me to reference not just what the domestic Bank of Canada is talking about, but let's talk about what the IMF is stating. The IMF is projecting that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 on average in 2023 and 2024. Canada is expected to maintain its position as the country with the smallest deficit as a share of GDP among G7 countries, and still by far the lowest general government net debt as a share of GDP in the G7. What's up, Mr. Speaker? Canada's growth and leadership of the G7. That's what's up, and we're proud of it.
Hear that? Net deficit. Why do you think he uses that term?
Oh, well, we know why he uses that term, because they're backstopping that debt with the Canada Pension Plan, everybody.
Right. So the government, when it's calculating its net debt, it takes all of its debt and then it offsets that by using the Canada Pension Plan as an asset. That's not their money. That's our money that they're using to say, oh, look at this. Our debt isn't actually as bad as we think it is.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that this is what they're trying to do. And I'm stunned at the end when he says, we're proud of it. You're proud. Arif, look around the country, for goodness sake.
But these guys live in these ivory towers that they don't see the homelessness, they don't see the drug use, they don't see the crime, they don't see any of it. They live in these beautiful gated communities away from all the misery of the average Canadian.
Yeah, and then they come out and they wave to a few people that are, selected to be put in front of them to tell them they're doing such a great job, and then they go, take their photographs and then they go back in. Like, this is insane, folks. You have tent cities everywhere. You have food bank use on historic levels in Canada. You have people skipping meals to afford their home, to afford, the food that they actually have. You have multi-generations of families being forced to live together because the other generations have lost their homes due to the problems in this country. And Arif stands up and he says he's proud.
Right, this reduction in the key interest rate. The Honourable Member for Belfast-Levy. Mr. Speaker, now we've seen it all. An incompetent Prime Minister who is pushing his Finance Minister to run up a staggering $40 billion deficit. And now he's blaming her for his failure and is replacing her with an unelected man. And all the while, he struts around equal voice, claiming to be a proud feminist. What hypocrisy! Will the Prime Minister finally admit that his minister is a mere facade now, because he is forcing her to break her promise to respect the $40 billion deficit ceiling?
So, why do they have a woman standing up asking this question?
Well, this line of questioning, it's not for the Liberals, it's not for Freeland, it's not even for Trudeau, it's for Liberal voters to see that Justin Trudeau is not the feminist that he says he is. Because let's face it, Trudeau's main voter base right now are women.
Yeah, because nobody else trusts them. And it's even small cross sections of the demographics out there that are women. Like, it's his last bastion, basically, because young people gone, seniors in the process of leaving, middle-aged people gone. Like, nobody trusts this guy anymore.
No, but there are still some feminists and some voters that are aged, I would say 55 and plus, that are women, and also working aged women, so women my age, that still support Trudeau. Goodness knows why. But the Conservatives are showing this demographic on television that Trudeau is not the feminist that you think he is. He treats women horribly. Freeland is just the most recent woman that he's thrown under the bus.
You know, in my experience, the people who stand up and say, I'm a feminist, are the people that actually, if you get right down to it, have the potential to treat women, you know, the poorest out of everybody.
I'll tell you what, we deal with a lot of conservatives, not just like MPs, but just people who are conservative leaning in general. The conservative men that I interact with are fantastic. They open doors for me. They will ask how I'm doing, very polite, ask if I need anything. Just very, what's the right word? Chivalrous.
Yeah,
I think.
And they don't, you know, strut around like a rooster in a hen house saying, I'm a feminist, I'm a feminist.
No, and you know what? They treat me as an equal, but also with a little bit of care. It's very nice.
The honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. The Finance Minister promised to cap the deficit at already reckless $40 billion. But now it turns out the Prime Minister is shoving her through her own guardrail. The fake feminist Prime Minister is setting up Canada's first female finance minister to take the hit for his reckless spending so that he can then officially bring in the unelected man who has been pulling the strings. Why is the Prime Minister bullying the Finance Minister into breaking her $40 billion deficit guardrail promise and forcing her to deliver carbon tax Carney's fiscal update?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
While the Conservatives are focused on this soap opera, Parliament Hill, grapevine, gossip, Mr. Speaker, our Liberal government has been focused on the pocketbooks of Canadians.
You got that right, Rachel. You have been focused on our pocketbooks and emptying them as fast as you possibly can. But you're going to try and turn around and tell everybody, but we're putting more money back in your pockets. Like, it's magic and only the Liberals can do it. You can do lots of magic on a balance sheet. It doesn't mean it's real.
Well, and it just frustrates me so much that the Liberals are like, oh, well, you know what? That $40 billion guardrail wasn't good enough. Let's just forget about that and we'll keep spending however much we want. Could you imagine if a family tried doing that? Like, as a stay-at-home mom, I'm responsible for the family budget. And you have to be very, very careful because at the end, if you run out of money, that's it. There is no more. Well, so why are the Liberals just able to be like, you know what, we'll just keep going?
Well, here's the thing, right? They keep spending these massive deficits. And if you kind of read between the lines, what Justin Trudeau was trying to say back in 2015, when he was saying, you know, we're going to run some small deficits and then the budget's going to balance itself. So it was an idiotic way of saying it. But what he was trying to say is that, well, we're going to use our credit card and we're going to make some investments, and then those investments are going to mature, and then they're going to pay back the credit card and then some, and we will look like geniuses. That's basically what he's trying to say that he was doing. The problem is where they're making these, and they keep calling them investments, where they keep making these investments, there's no return. There is no return on the investment. And if you need proof of that, just look at the fact that they're still running deficit budgets 10 years later.
Right. And this reminds me of what Stephen Harper had said at the time. He said his deficits, meaning Trudeau's deficits, will not be small.
Right. And they will cost Canadians. And the problem with Trudeau's deficits is they keep getting larger. So, dude, at what point are you going to admit that your investments were just into a bunch of lottery tickets and you've lost all of that money and there is no return coming?
Right.
And what we need to do is have an intervention, get this gambler out of government so we can actually get control of our finances again and accept the reality of the budget is what it is now, the deficit is what it is now, and it's time to start fixing it, and it's going to take a long time to do it.
The honourable member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Canadians cannot afford this Prime Minister's fake feminism. He had the gall this week to say, and I want you to know that I am and I always will be a proud feminist. You will always have an ally in me and my government. All while working overtime behind the scene to throw Canada's first female finance minister under the bus for his reckless spending. Will the so-called feminist prime minister set aside his hypocrisy and admit that he is responsible for forcing the finance minister to break her $40 billion deficit promise?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I was also at the Equal Voice Gala the other night, and I heard the Prime Minister's speech. I heard him talk about all the tangible measures that we have taken as a government to advance equal rights among genders, including a gender-neutral cabinet, including $10 a day childcare, including a women's entrepreneurship strategy. I also heard the deputy leader of the Conservatives and her speech, which completely undermined the whole mission.
I really do apologize. I've been having trouble hearing the honourable parliamentary secretary answer the question.
Oh, Lisa Hefner. I hope she's enjoying her last stint in Ottawa because even though Hamilton Mountain does not currently have a nominated candidate, she's set to lose.
To nobody.
Right, to no particular conservative, but it will be a conservative.
Right. Like, what does that say when you're expected to lose to miscellaneous conservative to be chosen later number one? What does that say?
It says you're not doing a very good job, does it?
Anyhow, I love that she starts tossing out all these buzzwords. A gender-neutral cabinet. What is that? Tell me what that is, Lisa, because Canadians have no idea what you're talking about. And why are you prioritizing gender over competence?
Well, because to the Liberals, again, identity politics are number one. To them, just because 50% of the population roughly is female, therefore 50% of the cabinet should be female. That's not how it works. I mean, men and women make different career choices based on our personal preferences. Women, by and large, this is just a generalization, go into the caring professions. Something like politics, I don't really think you can classify as a caring profession. It's rough. It's hard. You spend half your life in Ottawa away from your family. That's hard for a lot of women. I know when you guys joke, oh, Fox, you should be an MP. The answer is no. I couldn't cut it. I do not have the personality for it, and I couldn't bear to be away from my son and my husband for that long.
Well, and the thing is if women really wanted more women in government, guess what would happen? They would elect them. They would elect them in.
No, but I think fewer women run for politics. And I'm not saying that, oh, well, women who run for politics are bad. I just think they have a certain subset of a personality that many women, including myself, do not possess.
Right. And it's interesting because
it's rare.
You hear these questions come up where you hear, well, you see these women, they're in politics and they get teased, they get trolled, and that's where the focus is on. But they don't seem to understand that men get that too. The difference is men understand that it's very competitive. Politics is extremely competitive. And what do you need? You need very competitive personalities in there. And when you look at the extremes, men are by far more competitive than women are. And that's just from biology. Like, it's ingrained. Like, look at little boys from the time they are 3 years old. They are constantly competing. So that's why you end up having that. And it's tough. It's not to say that there's not competent women out there that can run and do a great job.
Oh, there very much are, because we see them in the Conservative cabinet, and we've had the privilege of speaking with many of the candidates who are women, and they're going to do great things for this country. But I think on aggregate, many women do not have the personality set, I would say, for politics, because again, it is very competitive. It's very rough. You're away from your family for a lot of the time. And also, maybe we don't have the interest.
Well, and here's the other thing to consider. Most men don't have that skill set and that personality to succeed at politics as well. Remember, there's only a tiny fraction of society that ends up being in politics. So most men are also not in that category. It's just on aggregate, you have more men that are able to be more competitive and have those attributes to be able to succeed in politics on the extremes than women do, which is why you see women overwhelmingly in some of the other professions, because they do a much better job in them than men. So let's get rid of this gender crap and focus on competence and merit.
The honourable member from Peterborough-Kawartha.
This fake feminist prime minister is determined to decimate Canadians' lives by destroying the economy, and he will throw anyone under the bus to do it, including his token finance female minister. Canadians know he's weak. They know he's lost control of his cabinet and his spending. The question is, will the first ever female finance minister have the courage to stand up to that fake feminist prime minister and stick to her promised $40 billion deficit?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, here's something tangible that the Leader of the Opposition could do. In the next election, he could run more women, and he could get more women in those seats. If he really wants to prove his credibility in terms of standing up for women, let me just give you some stats, Mr. Speaker. In this current House of Commons, 16.9% of the women elected sit here in the Liberal benches. How many in the Conservative benches, Mr. Speaker? 6%. That's the kind of numbers that we are talking about.
Order. Order. I'm certain all members want to hear the question from the honourable member. The honourable member from Peterborough-Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, on the Conservative side of the House, women stand here because we're skilled and we're allowed to use our voice. Mr. Speaker, Jody Wilson-Raybould is testament to this. That is a fake prime minister, but that is not the point. We're not here to talk about gender. We're here to talk about the economy, and it is destroyed under that fake feminist prime minister. So again, if she is not a token, will she stand up to him and say, no, I will abide by my $40 billion deficit guardrail to help this economy get back on track and save Canadians' lives?
Amazing.
I love Michelle Ferrari.
That was incredible.
I love that she takes no crap from the Liberals, and her retort was perfect.
It was perfect because it's true.
Right. Like, they're saying, well, you know, he could run more women.
He's going to run the best candidate.
Right.
Period. Pierre doesn't care, you know, what you look like, what sex you are, who you love. Doesn't matter. Can you do the job, and are you going to be a good asset to this team? That's what matters.
Well, and just think what Patty Hajdu is suggesting there. This is what she's suggesting, that the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, was picking these people not because they would be the best people to represent their constituents by, not because that they're the most competent, but only because they were women.
Right.
So,
and I mean, that's how we ended up with, it was one of the recent by-elections where a liberal female who in a previously liberal held riding lost, and she left after like 45 minutes and didn't do a concession speech, or she just kind of said something and left before they even finished counting the votes. Do you recall?
Right. It was really early.
I don't recall which riding it was.
It was in LaSalle or Marverdun.
Yeah, that's what it was. And again, she just kind of showed up expected to win because she was a liberal woman and got decimated.
And left all of her supporters there wondering what the heck's going on. Like, her headquarters was populated by all these people, and she basically just said, screw you all, I'm going home.
I'm done. Yeah.
But, ladies and gentlemen, you want to see the difference between a token woman on the liberal side and someone who actually earned their spot, just like the rest of the Conservatives earned their spot? Look no further than Michelle Ferrari, because she comes to play. She's extremely competent, and she's gonna stand up and let you know if she disagrees with you. Those are the type of politicians that we need, and those are the types of politicians that are actually going to fix this country and earn back the trust of Canadians.